Welcome to Season 1, Episode 2, Part 1 of Hide and Seek. Now, I know it's been a while since I've made one of these, but stuff's been happening in my life. Also, in many ways, I'm not as excited about this episode as most others. This, of course, is not to say that this isn't a good episode, or that it doesn't have a function. SG1 did something similar with The Enemy Within, and if I remember correctly, Stargate Universe did something like this as well, where after the breakneck first episode, the breakneck pace of the first episode, where everything is happening that sets the plot for the next series, they take an episode to slow down a little bit and to give both us, the viewers, and the characters to get used to this new world. I also think that one of the secondary reasons for this specific episode is because of Rodney McKay. Now, as I said before, the reason I am watching it, or the reason I started watching Atlantis, was because a friend of mine had a crush on Rodney McKay or I'm not sure, David Hewlett. I, however, want it stated for the record that I do not, nor have I ever, had a thing for either. I mean, to each their own, and though I like the character of Rodney, I never caught the feels for him. However, and I can't stress this enough, I do believe the character of Rodney McKay is very good. David Hewlett played him as an asshole, but a compelling asshole. Now, back to the episode, and it opens with Rodney getting a shot to activate the ATA, the Ancient Technology Activation Gene, from Carson. He gets to be pretty annoying, telling Carson medicine is about as much of a science as voodoo. Yet, here he is, volunteering to be patient zero in an experimental gene therapy. The commentary writes itself. Carson also mentions that the trial hasn't been overseen by the FDA, which is an American control agency. Even if Atlantis had been parked right next to Earth, the FDA still wouldn't have had jurisdiction. I mean, what makes this line even more confusing is that Carson is Scottish in canon as well as in real life, and Rodney is Canadian in canon as well as in real life. Also, the writers of the episode are Brad Wright, Robert C. Cooper, and Martin Gero. Brad Wright, Robert C. Cooper are Canadian, and Martin Gero is Swiss. I mean, nobody in the conception or execution of this is actually American. I mean, none of them in their basic lives can give a flying orangutan about the FDA. I mean, obviously, it's here merely for the audience. We have to admit that American, as in USA American, parlance have been influencing much of the English-speaking world. If you want to make a point about the lack of governmental oversight without having to explain the complex framework involving the Scottish government, the chief medical officer, directorate, and the independent bodies, yeah, I had to Google that oversees the Scottish medicine, you really just, you just call it the FDA and be done with it. I mean, you don't have to explain, you just slap the badge on it and we go. And anyway, this also gives Carson a moment to explain to us, the viewers, what the ATA gene is, which is you need this gene to activate the technology. I mean, there's also this lovely little moment where Rodney offers his left arm. I think this is flipping. So offers his left arm, and then Carson gives him this look and just takes his right arm and prepares it for the injection. He also tells Rodney that the side effects may include nausea, dry mouth, and the irresistible urge to run on a small wheel, seeing as this has previously only been tested on mice. We also get a quick glimpse of Rodney playing with this doodad. It's an ancient experimental doodad, and when Carson asks him about it, he says it's just something he found the ancients had left lying around. Anyway, we jump to Peter Groden explaining a few things to Elizabeth and obviously to us. See, this episode isn't as action-packed as some, but it is an episode that takes a small breath between the action episodes to help the Atlantis team and us get more familiar with the new world and to tie up some loose ends. I mean, Peter Groden here takes a moment to explain that they have fresh water. Not everyone needs the 88 gene to use the technology. It can just be activated. And these are little things that we need to know. Little things that we could question later on, which could make things difficult. But now they've neatly tied it up into a little bow. Obviously, the Atlanteans had desalination plants where they could get fresh water from the ocean. And obviously not everyone had the 88 gene, so other people can run the stuff. It just needs to be initiated, which, I mean, this is good. And I like how uncomfortable Elizabeth looks after the kids run by her. I mean, she's obviously not a kids person, but she has a point that maybe the civilians, and the kids in particular, should not mess with ancient tech. A point we see validated later on in the rest of the episode. I mean, Atlantis might be fantastic, but it can also be extremely dangerous. And then she also mentions we have to get rid of the 10,000-year-old dead plants. I love that. Anyway, it's all pretty mundane until she and Peter walk in on John throwing Rodney off the balcony. I mean, look at her and Groden's faces. Look at Rodney's face. And then look at John's face. I mean, this poor woman is surrounded by overgrown children. And we see the doodad is now attached to Rodney's chest and it's glowing. It is, as he explains it, a personal shield. And to prove its efficacy, he asked Peter to hit him, something which Peter does with gusto and hurts his hand. And this is Elizabeth trying her best not to kill John Rodney, asking them how they think that testing this thing, how it's a good idea to test this thing by throwing Rodney off a balcony. And Rodney is just oh, that wasn't the first thing we did. And John's yeah, no, the first thing he did was to shoot Rodney in the leg. And this is Elizabeth questioning her entire existence. This is going to be a very long mission, even if they find ZPMs right now. It's going to be a long mission. She's surrounded by idiots. And then, of course, the manure hits the fan, and we see that Rodney can't get to the doodad to deactivate it. And this is Elizabeth probably thinking, I told you so, to herself. And remember what I said in the previous episode, that smart people don't have to act dumb? Yeah, well, never mind that. Okay. So I am joking a little. In my country, in my language, we have a saying, slim vang sy baas. It basically means that if you're too smart for your own good, you're going to be the architect of your own problems. And yeah, we managed to put a lot of meaning into 4 words. Anyway, we cut to the intro, and we are finally shown that yes, Aidan Ford is part of the main credited cast. Now, before we continue, I want to talk about the purpose of this episode a little. Yeah, some stuff will happen, like there's some action, and yeah, we'll get to know Atlantis a bit more. But I think the true reason for this episode is to get Rodney on John's off-world team, to show they have some kind of relationship. Also, I like to, when speaking of a character, I like to put some kind of fan work in the background. I saved these things a long time ago. I don't have the original links anymore, so I can't credit the fan base, except for this one, which I don't know who made it. But as I've been doing this a while, and I also fiddled on the fanfiction.net platform with fanfiction of Atlantis, I, to my eternal shame, know what the relationship name of John and Rodney is, and I had to plumb those depths to find this picture. And I would suggest, unless you are of that persuasion, which is, if you like really intense sexual fan fiction about two very straight characters getting it on, then yeah, unless you're of that persuasion, don't Google McShip. Okay? Anyway, so I want you to keep in mind that up until this episode, which is the first episode, which was a double episode, granted, Rodney and John have not spoken to one another beyond the moment when Rodney told John about the puddle jumpers. And even at the end of Rising, there's this scene where everyone talks to everyone else, but at no point does John and Rodney talk to one another. They do not interact at all. And I suppose every time before when I watched this episode, it passed me by. I mean, there are jokes and there's this casual friendliness between John and Rodney, but there really is no reason for Rodney to have asked John to test the thing on him. Like, Rodney could have asked anyone else. He could have asked Ford. He could have asked any of the other military personnel. He could try and run a kind of scientific test with Zelenka. Oh, poor Zelenka. I kind of like him. Anyway, but the person Rodney asks to, shoot him in the leg is John. And by the time we step into it, the two of them already have a bit of a relationship going. And I can't decide if this is good writing or not. I mean, it does skip over why Rodney decided to go ask John and to see John say, yes, I'll shoot you in the leg. And then, but it also frees up a lot of time. It skips over all the mundane stuff, and it gives us the sense that we have stepped into this friendship that's been going for a few days. We don't have to explore how John and Rodney became friends. But we do show that before they are sent off-world to go do stuff, they have spent time together. They are friends, and as such, I suppose it's good. Yeah, I'll say it was definitely a choice by the writers. You can feel that it's not just they aren't dazzling you just because no one forgot that they haven't spoken to one another. But they need these two to be together, not romantically, please. They need these two to be friends and to be on the same team, and they need to establish the bond. And unlike SG-1, they didn't have the movie for Jack and Daniel, or those two and Teal'c with the first episode. So skip over some of it and imply it, and yeah, I feel this moves us forward successfully. Anyway, after the intro, we cut to Carson bandaging Peter's hand, the one he hit Rodney with, and they joke about giving Rodney a superhero name because he's standing there feeling sorry for himself, because that's Rodney. He stands there feeling sorry for himself. And this little byplay between the other characters, quite often at Rodney's cast, is something we'll see throughout the series, and it's fun. And I love it. It makes the characters feel lived in. They're not just standing around waiting for their important line. And they are casual enough with one another to be joking with one another about someone else. And there's an air of relaxation that belies the often seriousness of the series in these little byplays. But also, the writers are good enough to use these little byplays to get the story right back into what is important. I mean, it's not just a byplay, it's good writing. And we see this while they're joking. The two of them suddenly come to the same realization at the same time. And they want to know, Rodney, can you actually still drink or eat anything? And no, he can't. So anyway, remember what I said about Slim Fang Sabas? Yeah. Rodney admits he didn't even bother reading the instructions that came with the device. Like, there's a device, it's fancy ancient tech, and he did not read it. Yeah. I guess, you know what's the worst part? I get it. I'm also pretty bad at reading instructions. There's a lot of stuff that I'm like, oh yeah, I get the gist of this. I'll just wing it. And then, yeah. Yeah, I think my husband will laugh at me. Yeah, he's definitely laughing at me. Anyway, okay, that's enough at my expense. So, Rodney also tries the mental component because, I mean, all ancient tech has this mental component, and no, it's not working either. The thing isn't coming off. Peter even asks if the gene therapy might work off, but Carson is doubtful. Now, I love that we are shown how the little loose threads are picked up, such as Carson bandaging Peter's hand. Not only is this moment used to further the plot, but we are never left having to assume anything. They try to keep the plot holes as to the bare minimum. Like, you could... So many episodes, there are no consequences for actions. But in this episode, they have Peter hit Rodney. It's shown he hurt his hand. Afterwards, Peter obviously had to go get some medical treatment, and they used the moment to further the plot. This is very well done. It's very... I think they call it tight writing. I did not study writing or plot writing. So anyway, I just think it's really good. Meanwhile, John is briefing Elizabeth and some of the other military personnel on maintaining security on Atlantis. And when Taylor offers the Athosian help, because of course she would, Elizabeth is reluctant, making Taylor ask if she doesn't trust the Athosians. And this part I really, really love. Elizabeth is set to answer. And her answer is, I mean, it's a valid answer, but John has her back, giving Taylor a reasonable answer and heading off conflict. Of course, we will get back to this initial friction between Taylor and Elizabeth, but I love how committed John is right off the bat in his loyalty to Elizabeth. He might question her, but I would like to remind you, he did that in private. In front of others, he backs her completely, and this is great characterization. Wow. And let's be honest, this show did a lot for furthering the idea that women could be leaders and that men and women could work together. Regardless, even now we still live in a world that is pretty much male-dominated. In fact, I think stuff is even worse now. I mean, the entertainment industry and liberal feminism in their overzealousness swung the pendulum too far, too heavily. And now there is a lot of mainstream pushback against women in leadership positions. I mean, just take a look at the tradwife trend, for instance, or the girl boss stereotype in movies. But anyway, this isn't that time. This is the mid-aughties. And though this is Stargate, and though this is in the Pegasus Galaxy, one could argue that John would have known how important it is to not only show a unified front with Elizabeth, but to also openly support her, maybe even make things easier for her. At the same time, he is a leader, and his leadership is never questioned or compromised, and he isn't emasculated. Instead, they are two different leaders working together within a system regardless of their sex, both bringing their own thing to the table and building upon without undermining one another. This is great. I love this. Anyway, Taylor mentions her people are intimidated by Atlantis, and some think the spirits of the ancestors remain, which is, of course, not completely unreasonable, as we'll see later. And yeah, it must be spooky for them. Elizabeth again mentions that it's probably a good idea to restrict some of the Athosians' freedom, especially the children around the city. And after all, Holling has gotten hurt, and we'll see later he broke his foot. And I don't know if Christopher Heidel got hurt and they just worked it into the story, or if they just slapped a cast on him for the sake of the narrative. Anyway, Rodney is sitting in and he is like, don't go messing with stuff you don't understand. Even the most innocuous thing can end up killing you. It's like, yeah, he messed around and found out. Of course, John gives him this look. He's not convinced. I mean, yeah, and Rodney is a bit of a melodramatic, he's a bit of a drama queen, I suppose. In fact, Elizabeth is as unconvinced as John. She goes to talk to Carson about it, mentioning that Peter and some of the others are going through the text that Rodney ignored, with the thing, and they can't find anything helpful. And again, the writing is solid. If you had wanted to ask, so why didn't Rodney go back to read the text? Well, they answered the question. They did. In fact, there's their entire team reading it, and they can't find anything helpful. And I love Elizabeth's theory that Rodney can actually shut down the doodad at any time he wants to, but he's just too scared to do so. He's as intimidated by Atlantis as the Athosians. And Rodney, who considers himself a step above, even a step above humans, like he's the best, and he is as intimidated by Atlantis as the Athosians, which he probably thinks are not as developed as he is. Anyway, Carson tells her that despite everything, he's pretty sure Rodney doesn't want to die of dehydration. But Elizabeth just informs him that Rodney isn't dying yet, is he? I mean, he's not there yet. And she looks so smug saying it. And yeah, before anyone starts that she, as a leader, should not be looking smug about her colleague's possible demise, my reading of this is more that she really knows Rodney by now. I mean, she's selected him. She spent time with him, as we've seen in the previous episode. Like, they already have a relationship. They are friends. They have been working together for a while. They trust one another, and she knows Rodney. This is very much a Rodney move. It also quite possibly has to do with her massive belief in the ancients. And I mean, she mentions that the ancients, and she is really, really, really impressed by the ancients. And she mentions that they built redundancies into everything, explicitly mentioning the city rising to the surface. And I mean, Elizabeth's trust in the ancients is misplaced. They're not as smart, not really. But I do wonder if the writers of the episode Before I Sleep or if the writers at this point already had Before I Sleep planned. Anyway, in the meantime, Elizabeth mentions that she thought that though she trusts Taylor, she doesn't trust the Athosians, but that's because she doesn't know them yet, and she should get to know them, which we know things will happen before she gets time to do that. And yes, when John mentions that they can blow up the city if need be, if attacked by the Wraith, and that they should probably tell Taylor. Elizabeth has a fair point that Taylor trusts the Athosians, as she should, but Elizabeth has a responsibility to the Atlantis team, to the humans. It's actually a very bad position to be in, and I don't envy her decision. I think regardless of what she did, it would have been a tough call. Like, someone's going to be angry at her regardless. And yet John has her back, which is good. Anyway, we cut to a scene of John telling some of the Athosian kids the story of Michael Myers, from Halloween. And obviously they don't get it. And at first I thought this little scene is to show the cultural differences between humans and Athosians. But really it does add to the... it sets up the tone and some of the themes for the rest of the episode. It also gives us this little moment where where we see more about John and Taylor's interactions as she asks him about football. I mean, she has questions. And now let me be honest, I know about as much about American football as Taylor. But of course, John brought a tape. Yes, he probably brought a tape. Even in the early mid-aughties, it was probably like a videotape. I missed the sound and the smell and the feel of those. Anyway, he brought a taped football game, and he shows Taylor, and he and Ford can have some time to bond over being American. He also gets to tell us about the concept of a Hail Mary in football, which again is thematic, but for me personally, seeing as there's a movie out now called The Hail Mary Project, I'm just happy John was here years ago to explain football to me. And that's the about a third way into the episode. This is kind of a natural break. I did promise to try and keep these short, although I don't think this one is either. Anyway, you know how this goes. On YouTube, we don't say goodbye, we say like, subscribe, comment, and share. Until next time.